Long time agon from Diary of a Townie. Someone new came to the village. He didn't leave a good print. He must have been through some suitable tough times. That's presumably why his eyes feel to have an unknown honey in them. I wanted to get relief of that man, but the Ville had accepted the foreigner as always. I decided to not watch too important about it. It had been 4 days since the man settled in the Ville. He seems like a quiet man. Many noisy reciters in the Ville showed interest in him, but I wasn't particularly interested. Roughly 10 days have passed since the man came. Now I have an idea as to what that man is doing. The kiddies who were skimming over his hedge told me that he trained with Brand. Every day looked like he'd a painful backstory. Now I know what it's. Still, I'm not interested in him. Another month had passed. He still wields his brand in his yard. Have not seen him, however, and still not interested. Month has again passed. The man still wields the sword, and the townies continue to chatter about it, that he was stropping his brand chops for some kind of vengeance. Might be was a departed knight or a notorious mercenary. They're nosy, and I am not particularly interested. Hereafter I will go see him to exercise his brand. He has been training for half a time every day. My curiosity rose. How fast is he and how strong he might be, but know it all. Hereafter I'm hugely disappointed. It might look great for reciters who know nothing about the brand, but I've seen several swordsmen working. I can tell for sure he was not great, but in reality he was average. As I walked towards the yard I allowed that there has to be a painful story about this man, but it did not look like he'd break his problems. He's a stupid person. I really need to stop paying attention to him. A family came into the villa, sheltered mercenary, one son and son still. His son was relatively a beauty. When she smiled, it's like an angel had come down from heaven. I will try talking to her hereafter, and this is not veritably important, but the man swung his brand. Moment. It has been 3 times now. Today was a strange day. Right now beside me my beautiful woman Rama is asleep. I'm so happy. Oddly enough, the Joe who has absolutely nothing to do with me keeps popping into my head. 5 times is a long time. I who fell in love, got married, and set up happiness, but that person did not change. He just stood there in the same place, swinging and swinging and swinging again. I'll have to check every day from hereafter. 5 times 1 month. The man has kept training with his brand. 5 times 2 months. The man has kept training with his brand. It has been 6 times. It's snow, but he still trained Rama, and I had a lovely child, my lovely son. Everyone give me congratulations for baby girl, but that man non-stop his training. It's have been 7 times. Time was going fastly. So moment has been 12 times. I'm not as interested as I used to be. His training is like nature's rhythm. How could that man be obsessed with it for such a long time? And 35 times have passed. Village man with his wrinkled face woke up. Beforehand in the morning he was the Ville chief. He was Reme's hubby and Laura's father. Everyone in the Ville liked him for tree feeding others with a warm smile. The times have changed him. After precisely examining every niche and fissure of the Ville, the last place he went was where not numerous people visited. The house of the man who trained with a brand in his hands. But moment commodity different came into his eyes. He snappily moved as he was shocked. The old man was not particularly ill, but he was not strong enough to run. The old man stood with his wide eyes. A colossal brand was supporting the swordsman, and the table where Argentine light was around him. The Ville man did not say anything until it'll end. When table where Argentine light vanished in heaven, he led him down and closed his eyes. The townie looked down at the old swordsman's body for a moment and spoke with heavy eyes. Rest in peace. Suddenly golden hair boy opened his eyes, sweating each over his body, allowing about dream he saw right now about brand man and Ville. Now we see Farah, at a state located in the southern part of the Hale area, was notorious for its trade with neighboring fiefdoms. Still there was commodity additional which was more notorious than that. It was the kiddies of King Baron Farah. Expert security guard spoke with a huge smile. Youthful lady Kiro. There is no other word to describe her. She's only 11 times old, and she has formerly entered and sanctioned Conjurer S. Title 1 Novitiate. Soldier asks, is she get directly appointed by the royal family? Elderly guard spoke that it's extremely rare to be sorcerer, and they're harder to find than wizards. Now that she has been named as a magician, the future of the dictator's state must have turned solid. The face of the elderly guard who spoke was full of pride, but that was all. For a while a guard with a large nose who had been quietly hearkening until also spoke. No matter how great Queen is doing, in the end the eldest son is that prince. The elderly guard who had been all praises for the queen so far was shocked and said that prince does not intend to get out of bed. What's so great about him? Still the big nose guard did not stop mumbling, and a fierce quarrel broke out. Both the guards' faces turned red by wrathfulness. The novitiate who was stuck between them was not sure what to do. It was true that youthful lady Kirill is notorious, but there's another person who, for a while a guard with a large nose who had been silently listening until then spoke. No matter how great princess is doing, in the end the eldest son is that prince. The senior guard who had been all praises for the princess so far was shocked and said that prince doesn't intend to get out of bed. What is so great about him? However, the big nose guard didn't stop mumbling, and a fierce quarrel broke out. Both the guards' faces turned red by anger. The rookie who was stuck between them wasn't sure what to do. It was true that young lady Kirill is famous, but there is another person who is more famous than her. People call him the lazy lord. As the guard said, he was always asleep by the time he did nothing but sleep all day. It probably had something to do with the accident in which he lost his mother. Seeing his mother die right in front of his eyes at that young age must have been shocking. It was when he was in thought a high-pitched voice came from behind the two guards who were arguing, turned around and were shocked it was Kirill Farah and her mother, the second wife of Baron Emil Farah. Their blue eyes were focused on the guards. Three of them immediately bowed in front of them. Kirill Farah reprimands the guards for a long time. After a while, Emil stopped her in a calm voice, saying that guard has understand their mistake and asked them if they all say immediately that they understands and said that they never gossip while duty. The guard who was sweating answered once again loudly, and the young magician and Baroness disappeared towards the garden. The rookie who had been watching the scene gulped at the scene. At that time Irene Farah, the eldest son of the Baron, couldn't sleep. He would sleep in the morning when others wake up, and slept the entire day when people were struggling to make a living. It was truly strange. The usual Irene hardly dreamed, but the dreams he had been having for the past few days were completely different. He still remembered that sweetness in his mouth and the way muscles burn when he was exhausted with sword. They are all seems to real for him. Curve of action. He can't sit still now, so he calls someone. Reaction was quick. A servant dressed in neat attire asks his lord if he needs something. Irene hesitate a bit, but then asked that he wants sword. Servant didn't realize for a moment, but as soon as he understand the word, his eyes couldn't help but pop out, and he was doubting his ears. In the training hall of the Farah family, the soldiers who were doing their personal training each made their own guesses, gazes filled with unease, no one believing what they are seeing. None of them thought that Irene would practice. Servant explained him all wooden swords are the same, they vary in shape and length. He is not familiar with swords, so he can't recommend a suitable sword for the young lord, so he suggests to call an expert, but Irene said that he is all right. He soon skimmed through the entire place and slowly picked up a sword. Soldiers couldn't believe in his eyes, think that he is dreaming, but one soldier pinched him to wake up. Servant's expression darkened. It's not an unusual sword, rather it was close to the standard one, but the size was too big to the extent where it felt like the young lord have trouble handling it. His sword movements were so disappointing that they couldn't help but laugh at this. Is natural. There is no way that the most lazy person of the kingdom can wield the sword well. As soon as he picks it, they think that he come because of that young Lord Giron of neighboring a state who humiliated him in face, and Irene couldn't say anything back. People's interests faded in no time, saying that he will give up in no time, going to crawl into bed. Their negative attitude could be felt by the servant, who was standing on the side. His eyes widened in rage. He said to his lord that swordsmanship is difficult and cannot done by Allah alone, so he should take advice from expert. But Irene didn't know what he was saying. He couldn't stop his hands, which were holding onto the sword, from trembling. Every time he wields sword, it feels like his entire body screaming in pain, but he feels the more he reenact what happened in his dreams, he feels like a heavy burden lifted within himself. Every swing of sword make his one bad memory disappear and unease within his heart, so he can't stop but swing and swing. A loud voice entered Irene's ears. It was the servant. He wanted to stop him because Irene was practicing from long time, and now it's dark. He took a step forward to ask, but he couldn't. He stumbled to the ground, but serve and catch him. The intense pain spread around him and he was feeling very weak. Servant explained him that he overdid it. It really was dark outside, although it wasn't night. It was close to purple time when the sun set. Still looking blank, he looked up at the servant and said, if it has been that long, you should have gone somewhere or called me out. Servant replied that he didn't dare to leave, and he tried to call him, but he couldn't listen. He said to his lord that he can go and sleep now. He will clean this place, and he is very happy that his lord is training, but he can't do overdid in one time. Went to bed. A pain worse than the time when he moved. His body was spreading throughout his body. Regrets flooded, and it seemed like he wouldn't be able to sleep. Fatigue greater than the pain drifted him into the world of sleep. Now we see 5 days later, Irene wakes up in the morning and has his breakfast. The servant still can't believe seeing him like this. He asks his lord if he is going to train again today, to which he says yes. Ever since the dream, in order to satisfy his body's curving, he has to wield the sword, and as he practices more and more, his mind becomes clearer and he feels proud of himself, which is not bad at all. He thinks that he will have to eat lots of food to do more training, so he asks for more breakfast. Those soldiers were again standing there talking, but just then an old man calls them from behind. He had a huge beard and a stick in his hand. The soldiers asked him his introduction and where he is from. He tells that he is a wandering knight and has set out on a journey. Being a retired swordsman, he is a bit curious and wants to see the training hall of this estate. He says that he has permit too and starts searching for his permit in his pockets. The soldiers tells that there is no need to worry and lets him and the soldiers also go inside with them. And senior guard is shocked to see Irene practicing. The long-nosed soldier asks the senior guard for the money he lost in his bet because he bet about Irene. He thought that Irene was suddenly practicing because of losing to the neighboring countries. Lord Old Man watches Irene practice and thinks this guy isn't as bad as he looks. He can see that this guy isn't just passing the time, but his swordsmanship is very poor due to his lack of muscle strength. He could not hold the sword properly and his breath is also breaking quickly. It shows that he does not have enough stamina. The old man thinks that this boy has started practicing, but how long will he be able to continue his practice? Because perhaps he has done all this because of losing to the lord of the neighboring country, and thinks that if not today, tomorrow he will accept defeat. That's when the wind starts blowing very fast. There the soldiers and old man look
so breaking quickly. It shows that he does not have enough stamina. The old man thinks that this boy has started practicing, But how long will he be able to continue his practice? Because perhaps he has done all this because of losing to the lord of the neighboring country, and thinks that if not today, tomorrow he will accept defeat. That's when the wind starts blowing very fast there. The soldiers and old man look up. The soldiers immediately go to the square. Irene also looks up. A legendary griffin is flying in the air, and above it sits Irene's stepsister, Kirill, looking down proudly. Griffins are legendary animal which doesn't exist in reality, with the body of iron, wing of eagle, and skin which was tough as steel. It is a monster that looked like something out of fairy tale. However, Kirill was riding on it right now, seeing that people in training ground couldn't hide their shock. The power to move one's own creation, and the power to breathe life into and transform into the living creature. That is the power of Kirill the young magician. Kirill jumped from Griffin and pointed to 4 people, 3 guards and 1 old man. Asked to old man who is he. Old man reply that he is wandering knight, want to see training hall. But Kirill cut his words and say to 3 guards that why they still messing around, they should be on work at this time. Senior guards made excuse in tumbling voices. Their leg were shaking. She wasn't scary because she is celebrity, but because she is their superior, and it's surprisingly demanding person of her age. Kirill asked if she was wrong then, but guards say absolutely not, so biting the insides of their mouth, they apologize. It was at that moment when she continued to yell at the guards, but suddenly Irene asked her what she was doing. Kirill stared at the guards, and then turned to the young lord. Kirill spoke with furious tone saying him stop all this. Irene asked her to stop what? She said she is talking about this nonsense stuff. His body was itching and didn't show any signs of subsiding. Irene went back to where he was and began to train again. Kirill's eyes turned angry, and she says very angrily that swordsmanship is not a joke. What he has been doing for so many years, just sleeps all day, and he thinks that he will change something by swinging a wooden sword. She finds him pathetic. She says and explains to him that the inexperienced soldier standing here is also better than Irene, and asks him what if he is doing all this because what happened to him 2 weeks ago. She was shouting on him, but suddenly someone calls her from behind. The voice was of her mother, who asks her not to disturb his brother and calls her near. In the end she trudged towards her mother, and walked away. Before going, Emil said to Irene not to overdid it, and they leave. Kirill didn't take Griffin with him, which scares all the soldiers. That old man wonders if it was the same famous Kirill. He feels that some storm has come and gone. But he sees one thing, that all this has happened, but Irene's focus has not deviated at all. That's why he thinks to keep an eye on Irene for some more days. It was the night and Irene fell asleep. At that moment Kirill stunk into his room with the bag in his arm. The young lord was asleep. The voice came behind him. It was the voice of the servant. But with fierce expression she responded. The servant wanted to stop her, saying that she could meet Irene in the morning. But Kirill started letting out energy from her body. The magician's mystical power managed to subdue servant. And Kirill entered the room of the young lord. Irene opened his eyes in the morning, puzzled when he heard sound of music, turned his head to the source of melody which was entering his ear. It was coming out from doll. He picked up the paper which was next to the paper doll, in which Kirill apologized to him and also gave him doll so that he could relax somehow. In that paper his stepmother also has written something, but Kirill doesn't know. If Kirill bothers him, then he can tell her. He thinks that he has just been sleeping for so many years, yet both of them love him very much. Then from outside his servant tells him about breakfast. After that we now see that the servant was running fast because he could not believe that today Irene wants to have breakfast with his family. After this now we see that Irene was at the breakfast table where her father Baron Harun, her stepmother and stepsister were sitting with him. Kirill forcefully feeding him. There he tells everyone that he loves them very much and he is very thankful because even after all these years they still like him. His father also tells him that he loves him very much. He is very happy that Irene is training, but explains not to force him into training too much. After this we see that Irene was training and those people still can't believe that it has been 2 weeks since Lazy Lord started training, but they still don't see any improvement in him. After which now we see that old man who was sitting there watching Irene from behind. He has been observing Irene since 10 days. He thought earlier that this boy was doing all this in enthusiasm, and will soon give up. But his thinking was wrong. Irene was very lazy, so people started calling him Lazy Lord. He thinks that someone who has never even run properly in his whole life, with such a weak body, without giving up, how is doing training. He thinks that this boy is like a blacksmith who hammers day after day, in a way that he has been training for years. He has never seen a person with so much willpower. It is not a matter of strength or practice, but for the way this boy was till now, it is a wonderful one. He thinks it takes years for any hero to develop that much willpower, but today he is seeing it in a 15-year-old kid. If he continues his training like this and finds a good master, then no one can imagine what a mighty swordsman this Lazy Lord will become. Watch the old man, who asks the arena keeper if Irene has a private swordman tutor. The keeper tells him that Baron Ferreira has said that he will soon hire a tutor for Irene. It is too bad that Irene is practicing very hard and does not have a tutor. The old man asks the keeper the name of the tutor. The keeper tells him that he is probably Jukran. Hearing this, the old man shouts loudly and gets very shocked. The old man thinks that Jukran is a drunkard and always gets drunk, and always shouts at the soldiers. He thinks that Irene cannot learn from such a useless man. For some reason, he immediately decides to go to the Baron. Now we see that the Baron was very shocked and the old man standing in front of him. He thinks that does my son have that much potential? Holding a paper from Chrono Swordsmanship Academy. It is a contest where only the best and the most talented are accepted, regardless of the child's gender or where they belong. It is a big thing to get entry there, and the training of trainees is better than any noble. It is a place whose reputation is more than Royal Academy. It is very difficult to get entry there, but it is even more difficult to stay there. That is why Baron wonders if Irene will be able to stay there, facing so much competition. That's why he calls Irene, tells him everything. He says that he is not forcing in any way. If Irene wants to go, then only he can go. He takes a few days to think. He was sitting on his bed. He didn't know what to do. But one thing was sure, that he had spent so many years sleeping in vain. But now he does not want to lie down in despair. He decides to leave. His family bids him an emotional goodbye. He sits in a horse cart and leaves for Chrono with his servant. Kirill gave a small sword to the servant and said to give it to Irene on the way. Irene becomes happy seeing her younger sister's gift. Soon they reach the entrance of Chrono Academy. The servant wishes him well and leaves. At the entrance, some guards were praising their young lord Brett Lloyd, who belongs to the Gavaria Kingdom. Irene approaches the instructors and, while giving his complete introduction, tells that the person giving her the recommendation is an old man named Sir Bran Somerville. The instructors knew Sir Somerville, who exterminated many of the monsters years ago, and they all respected him, and his recommendation meant Irene would pass the test. The instructors send him towards the auditorium. The red-hair man could not understand why Sir Somerville recommended it for the first time. The man with yellow hair recognizes Irene as a lazy lord, and says that he is very weak. Red hair says that we will get to know about it soon. Irene reaches outside the auditorium. He had to open a door and enter the auditorium. He is very nervous but opens the door. Many kids look at him and he calms himself down. After which a man comes on the stage. He was the same instructor. He tells them that today total 400 trainees have gathered here. His name is Ahmed and he is their instructor, and he will teach them from today. The instructor looks at the three kids and thinks that some promising individuals have come this year. The best among them was Aaliyah Lindsay, second genius of Lindsay family. He thinks how gifted she would be. People says that she is more genius than her brother. Brett Lloyd looks at Aaliyah and thinks that now, because of Aaliyah, he will not be able to become number one. Otherwise he would have been number one. Instructor said that they are primary trainees and not official. Swordsmanship is more difficult than they think. If they pass the coming 2 exams, then they will be able to stay here for 1 year. Only then they will be considered as official. But this will not reduce their challenges but will increase even more. After which the instructor brings everyone to a ground. This ground will be used for training like their muscle strength and stamina, as well as it is a regular running course. After which he immediately starts running and tells them that their test has started. With this all the students start running. Some children stay ahead and some stay behind. But the lazy lord was behind everyone. He sat on the ground. He thinks that he will not be able to do it. The other children are going ahead and ahead of him. The instructor takes a look at him. Irene was watching him go ahead but could not even take a step forward. But still he stands up and starts running back. The instructor gives a big smile at this. Irene thinks that this is nothing in front of the man he saw in his dream. He also wants to be like him. But for that first he has to overcome his own lazy lord. Now we see another instructor who was watching Irene. He thought this guy would give up soon but he was wrong. Then he sees that something is wrong with Irene. He was very tired of running and was about to fall, but then the instructor comes running like a flash of lightning and lifts him in his lap. He sees that this boy has exhausted his body so much that he faints due to exhaustion. He thinks that this boy is very curious. Irene opens his eyes and finds himself in a different place. Then a man tells him that he is fine. The man introduces himself as the instructor of the recovery room. Name Rune Tarhal. Irene thanks him. Rune says that he should be thankful. He has a feeling that now he will see Irene again and again in the recovery room. Irene also agrees, but he was just joking. After which he gives a scroll to Irene. He asks what is it. Rune tells that he need not worry, it is test ranking. Midterm and final exam will be decided at the time of his official admission. This is just to check the level score of preliminary trainees. Irene came at number 400, means last. Rune tells him that if high number comes then good, but if low number comes then there is a chance for you to do hard work. No need to worry much about the number because it changes every year. Rune was trying to comfort him, but when he sees that Irene is not bothered by this, he thinks that this kid is just like I heard. after which he picks him up and sends him out and says that you should not be late on your first day. Now we again see big auditorium. Here the new instructor who saved Irene was giving speech, named Karaka. He will also train everyone from today, which shows everyone their time schedule. They will spend their day in this way: morning breakfast, then morning training, later lunch, again afternoon training, dinner at night, mental training, and lastly library arts class. After finishing their daily routine, they will be given free time, and from today all training rooms, training areas will be opened. Those who want to do more training during the day can go there. Irene likes this very much because he will be able to do sword training with more enthusiasm. But his happiness doesn't last long. Karaka raises his finger and tells that all weapons will be forbidden. And Irene gets very shocked. Lloyd was hanging out with some boys and tells by mouth of one boy that he found the library arts class very useless, made his ass off by making him memorize theory again and again. After this, Lloyd reaches the training room where everyone was training. Some were lifting bundles and some were doing push-ups. Lloyd thinks that anyway after a few days they are going to go out one after the other. Then he sees someone and gets quite shocked. Aaliyah Lindsay was lifting very heavy weights. Common student can't even imagine about lifting so much weight. Lloyd thinks the rumors were downplayed. He was feeling overwhelmed just by looking at this girl. He thinks that this girl is not a common student at all. He was not even feeling jealous now because she is on a completely different level. Boys standing near Lloyd think how her body is like this despite being so young. Then some boys look at the lazy Lord who was trying to lift weights and was in a lot of trouble. Those boys make fun of him and say that he should have started earlier. After all what he was doing for 15 years. Lloyd has no interest in him, so he starts to leave. But then he sees a red-haired girl who comes from commoner background. Her name is Judith and she is second in ranking after Aaliyah. He thinks it must have taken a lot of effort for Judith to come here because she is from commoner background. Lloyd stands behind her and thinks that he will not let her win next time. But then the girl shouts at him and asks why he is looking at her from behind. But because of this happening, suddenly he gets scared. That girl asks him to leave from there. But only then two men of Lloyd come there and start showing their lord's attitude, call him commoner, and sit on her knees and asks their lord Lloyd to apologize. They were fighting, but then Judith stops him and starts looking at the other side. As soon as Lloyd looks at that side, he gets shocked, because Aaliyah comes to Irene and asks him to talk about something. But Irene herself was quite shocked. Judith was looking at her. Aaliyah explains something to him. People are quite surprised to see this, after which Aaliyah starts leaving. Irene looks at the other student, and they start pretending that they didn't saw anything. But those people couldn't hear anything. Judith starts walking from there and comes to where Irene was practicing and asks him very angry what Aaliyah Lindsay said. Now we see that Judith was not believing Irene's words because he was saying that Aaliyah Lindsay was only teaching him how to train because she thought they were lovers. But Irene told that he never seen Aaliyah before. Judith starts leaving from there saying that people are feeling that I am bullying you. After this, Lloyd also comes there and asks the same question. A month goes by. Lindsay is teaching Irene, and Lloyd is watching it all from afar, thinking he can never win against Lindsay. But for Irene, no matter how much training he does, Lloyd thinks he will beat him easily, because Irene started training after him, even though Lindsay is teaching him now. But Irene will become lazy Lord again after a while, so there is nothing to worry about him. After which Lloyd reaches out to the running ground. Here he sees Judith running, and he also decides to run in anger because he wanted to be number 2 by taking Judith's place. His men did not want to put up with him, but he threatened them and they have to run. 3 months pass. Both the instructors were watching the students training and say that this year's students are very good, especially our trio is working very hard. And he probably needs to stop calling Irene a lazy lord because he is no longer a lazy prince. After which those people were sitting in the auditorium. The instructor makes an announcement that the time has come for their midterm evaluation, which is like a map made on the back. They have to complete the course within the time limit. All the children get very nervous and think that they cannot finish such a huge course in such a short time. The instructor explains to them that this is nothing different but the same thing that has been doing since many months, running and swimming. He says that all the students have to complete the course within the time limit and ranking is not important. But Academy will give reward to top 5 students, so that their motivation will be high. Exam will start after 10 days from today. Till then they can do whatever they want because from today till 10 days they will not have a single class except food. Lloyd was thinking that there are only a few people besides Lindsay who will be a problem for him, so he is sure to be in the top 5. But he is feeling uneasy because of Irene. Judith had set a new record and was about to go to rest, but then she sees Irene who is breaking his limits again. She thinks that Irene is much stronger today than when he came. She wonders if her willpower is less than the lazy lord's. That's why instead of stopping she start training again. Both the instructors were talking about how many students will pass this year. The other says around 30. Then a bald and bearded man comes from behind and says that 30, you are very gorgeous. That was the head sword master of Chrono Academy, Ian. After which he shakes hands with the new instructor who was from Adan Kingdom. The headmaster asks him with slanting eyes, "What do you think is my age?" He purposely makes his age younger and the headmaster enjoys it a lot. After this he turns his gaze around and stops at Lindsay. The instructor gives him all the details. The headmaster calls Lindsay a poor thing and tells what she is doing here instead of fulfilling her dreams. He wonders if the society has made her like this. He says, I hope that one day she could get rid of this foolish presence. The headmaster's eye falls on Judith. The instructor gives her complete information and tells that this girl is pushing her limits too much. So the headmaster goes to stop her so that she doesn't burn herself out, but is turned back the same way as the headmaster goes. Judith tells him that she will stop if headmaster gives her a good reason. After this the headmaster asks about Irene. The instructors talk among themselves that 30 minutes have passed while his training too. But the headmaster starts leaving without saying anything. The instructors ask him if he will not stop Irene. The headmaster says that Irene should not be stopped until he himself defeat and stop, because his body has completely controlled his mind. Now we see that Irene is very tired and falls asleep on his bed, after which he has a strange dream where someone hugs him tightly. He knows that it's not his mom's embrace, but still this place is quite warm. He thinks that if he can sleep like this again, it would be great to become a lazy lord again. But then there is a sword slash. He looks up and sees the same man whom he had seen in his dream. He sees his dream master and starts going towards him, but his comfort, who is in the form of his mother, tries to stop him. But he thanks her for everything till date and releases his hand and starts going towards light. He wakes up and stands from his bed. A lot of will of energy was coming out of him. He was in extreme determination. Now finally the time comes for the exam. The course is like this: heavy lifting, agility test, running, swimming and rich finish line. In the first test, heavy lifting, Lloyd looks at Lindsay and thinks that he will never win in front of her. But then he sees Irene, who was lifting a little too quickly. Lloyd is shocked to see this. With this, Lindsay finishes her test and gets first, as Lloyd had thought. But everyone is shocked to see that Irene is the second number. Irene's condition in the second test also same, was doing box jumping very quickly. His whole body was burning. Now he could not stop. Later his speed was increasing and increasing more and more. And he clears the second stage as well. Lloyd was watching, who was still stuck in the first test. Seeing this, Judith also pushes herself. The headmaster was watching everyone with a smile. Irene was in the third test running. Lindsay was running in front of him. Then he suddenly feels something strange, that he has to beat Lindsay. He was thinking this, but then someone was running very fast from behind and goes ahead of even Lindsay. It was none other than Judith, who was pushing her limits. She thinks that she will never give up. The humiliation she faced till date. Many people abused her, but she never stopped and reached here with her hard work, so she will never give up. As stage 4 swimming begins, Judith suddenly burns out after swimming for a while, and her leg hurts so much. She wonders if it was have to right now. But only then she see Lindsay going ahead of her, and she thinks that is her hard work of this much years gone in vain, and she starts drowning. But after this we see that Irene had saved her from drowning and was taking Judith with him. She sees that Irene is saving her, so she stops him from doing so and asks him to leave. But Irene does not do so and brings her to the shore. At that moment the instructor comes there and tells Irene to complete his race quickly. He will take care of Judith. Irene starts running from there. Judith sees her and says, "Idiot." The race is over and many students have failed and are very sad. The instructor comes to them and explains to them that there is still another test left, so there is no need to be sad. Irene have come at number 34 in this test. He just played while losing. Some boys look at him and think that this boy is very pathetic. Was he trying to make himself look good during the exam? But because of that, one of Lloyd's friend came on number 5, so that the boy was very happy. Lloyd thinks that if Judith had not burned out herself, then he would have been on number 4 today. He thinks that Irene, for this it is a perfect loss. The next day, Irene was running on the race course when Lindsay comes there and asks him why he did that yesterday. Irene understands that she is talking about Judith. Irene says that he felt it right, so he did it. But Lindsay says that he is just saying bullshitting. If he had not saved Judith, even then any instructor would have saved her, and just for this he gave up for reward from continent's greatest swordsman. Not only this, but he also turns those who used to make fun of him. Irene says that people call me lazy lord. He thinks that for so many years he was feeling that he was stuck in some place. He had his own reasons, but still he never tried to come out of that pathetic state. He could never even come out if those who loved him had not supported him. That's why he can't see it's someone sinking in front of him, and that's one of the reasons why he did it. Lindsay begins to walk away, but tells him that swordsmanship requires both talent and hard work, and that he lost out on receiving the personal guidance of a swordmaster because of his decision yesterday, and that she won't help him now. Also, when everyone makes fun of Irene, then she hopes he don't regret it. But he also asks Lindsay why she helped him. Lindsay does not answer properly and leaves from there. Now we see that the result of midterm exam had come, where 5 children will get reward from Swordmaster. But then the Swordmaster stops him and tells that 6 children, after which the instructor takes the name of Irene. Lindsay and Lloyd are shocked to hear this. The Swordmaster says that Irene could have come out in top 5, but he sacrificed himself and saved her colleague, so he deserves this reward. On which everyone claps. Now we see Lloyd, who is sitting in front of the headmaster. He understood that he is too narrow-minded, so he will learn from others as much as he can from now on, according to the headmaster's learning. And stand up leaves. Now Lindsay was sitting in front of the headmaster, who wanted personal guidance on sword training from the headmaster as a reward. But the headmaster tells her that you don't need to be influenced by anyone and live your life the way you want. It would be better for her if she returns home and learns the sword styles of her family. But still she asks him for guidance. The headmaster says that it was my fault. After this he says that Lindsay can practice here in front of him in this room. After this now it was turned for Irene. The headmaster tells him that he can ask whatever he wants. The headmaster was very curious that what would Irene ask for. Irene says that if I say that I want to make up with someone. Irene tells the headmaster that it is strange, but there is no one here with whom he can talk. The headmaster tells him that there is no need to apologize, after which he tells the whole thing to the master. The headmaster didn't think Lindsay was the one Irene wanted to make up with, and the master asks to come to the main topic, and says that saying a few words to someone does not end his reward. The headmaster can teach him any kind of sword technique he wants. But Irene apologizes and says he doesn't know anything about this. He just started sword swing 1 month ago, so he doesn't know what to ask for. After which Irene starts apologizing to him. The headmaster says something, but he does not listen. So the headmaster claps loudly in front of him and tells him that he doesn't need to apologize. A good swordsman should always be confident. The headmaster tells him that he can go now. When he feels he has something to learn, he can come to him. Or if he feels Irene has something to teach, he will come to learn himself. And Irene starts leaving from there. The headmaster looks at him from behind and thinks that this boy doesn't know anything about swordsmanship, but still there is no anxiety in his eyes, but some kind of determination and goal, exactly as if someone is guiding him. The headmaster then remembers a girl who was exactly like Irene, but then he thinks that they both have different auras. Irene was training in the training hall. Then Judith comes from behind and says that I knew you would be training. She says that from tomorrow we can use the sword. Irene asks him, what are you doing here? Judith is too shy to say it and says thank you to him out loud, and says that she will repay this favor, along with she says that from today we both will take care of each other. You eat alone, so now you will eat with me, as she says. Irene wanted to say that he prefers to eat alone, but Judith's horrified face forced him to agree. After that she starts leaving from there and says that your elder sister will not bother you anymore. Irene thinks that you are 3 years younger than me, but still he does not mind it. Seeing that Irene and Judith were talking very nicely with each other, all the students were feeling a bit strange. Lloyd finds it even more strange than these two that Irene and Lindsay are deliberately keeping distance between each other. Only then the instructors and headmaster come there and tell them that now they can choose their wooden sword and practice for 2 hours. Everyone keeps their wooden swords one by one. They can see the difference of so many days of training. Irene comes to swords while walking and take big sword and swing it, and everyone gets quite shocked. Lloyd comes in front of him and challenge him for fight, due to which everyone keeps looking at him. Irene looks at the headmaster asks him to accept, and he accepts the challenge. Both of them were ready for the fight. The headmaster tells them that if he feels that there is any danger to anyone, then he will stop the fight, on which both agree. With this the fight starts and Lloyd moves towards him with his full speed. Irene is more out of his way and start to dodge him with him big sword. After which Lloyd attacks him powerfully and that attack passes near his ear. Lloyd does not stop and keeps attacking him, and Irene is having a lot of trouble in avoiding the attacks. Judith was very nervous seeing this, because Lloyd wanted to test him. Lloyd thinks that Irene's reflexes are not bad, but the way he is holding the sword is very wrong. After which he wanted to test Irene's power, so he moves towards him. Irene was about to make a strong attack, but Lloyd dodges his attack and defeats him. After which everyone is put in different classes according to their swordsman skills, along with Lloyd, Judith, Lindsay. Some other students are taken in Class A, some children in Class B, and some in Class C. But till now he had not taken the name of Irene. In the end, the instructor tells that Irene is alone in Class F. He is very surprised to hear this. Now we see that Judith is very angry and she was feeling that the one who did all this with Irene is none other than Lloyd. Irene tells him that he is grateful that Judith is concerned for him, but he does not like that she angry because of him. Judith gets very shy after hearing this and says that she is not a concern for him. Now we see Lloyd, who thinks about that straight slash that Irene did to him during the fight. He thinks that Irene was very concentrated while doing that attack. He wanted to bear it straight before, but later changed his decision. He felt something strange at that time. Now we see the temporary instructor who was hired for Irene. The instructor tells him that Irene knows nothing but vertical and straight sword slashes, so he has to master all the basic sword techniques within 1 week. So he will put him in the C class, and even if he doesn't do that, he'll still be in the Class F. But it will be better if he leaves the academy if he cannot do even that much. Day after day passes. The instructor of the recovery room who was teaching Irene realizes that Irene is gifted and can do it. Irene shows Judith his basic sword skills and Judith gives him a thumbs up, and Irene is promoted to Class C.